Hi there, I'm Leanne Hershkowitz. I am a licensed professional counselor and a clinical neurofeedback provider. If you made it to this channel, which is either my YouTube channel or the one for the developmental trauma and neurofeedback group, it's probably because you've heard about neurofeedback and you're wondering about how do I go about doing this thing and what are all the ins and outs that I need to know to really make this a positive investment for my health or my child's health. So let's start with what is this neurofeedback stuff. We're actually in my neurofeedback office. My chair's over there for my clients. So neurofeedback is a way to help the brain learn and grow through learning theory and using some very sophisticated software. When we put the sensors on someone's head, there is no electrical anything being put in. It only reads the brainwave, much like if you had a finger pulse oximeter. It's just reading the brainwaves, and then that goes and connects to my computer, and through the computer a game is put onto the screen that's right there behind me that you can't see, so that you can actually see the feedback on the screen, interact with your clinician, which would be me in this case, and lower your arousal, calm the nervous system. When you're doing neurofeedback with someone who has either developmental trauma or big incidents of trauma, the brain functions differently. A lot of typical approaches to neurofeedback can go a bit funky if you haven't had the experience of working with trauma. We only understand so much of the brain at this point, and the more we learn, the more complex we know it is. And so a lot of what we know has been learned and passed down through people's experience of doing this work and how to do it. And one of the big people for that is Seaburn Fisher, my mentor, who I've worked with since I started neurofeedback 6-7 years ago. And it's about listening to the brain, but not just the data of the brain. That's an important part, but it's really about listening to the feedback of the person in the room with you. So my clients share with me what happens after the training, how they feel in the days coming. I watch what's happening in the room, how they come in the room versus how they leave the room. All of that is information that we need to to understand and hear how the nervous system speaks to us, because the data does not tell you all of that. And if you've got trauma or your child has trauma, you really want to be looking for a clinician who's willing to make adjustments that correspond to the reactions of the nervous system when you're doing amplitude training. Which brings us to another great point, that there are many, many different ways to do a neurofeedback, not just in our theoretical kind of clinical approach, but also in the actual physical ways. So the amplitude approach is just trying to decrease this speed of the brain. Let's say it's, delta, slow wave. We want to make less of it. We want to make less of theta, kind of middle slow wave. We want to make less high beta, fast anxiety wave. And we want to make more calm content wave. Maybe that's alpha or low beta, depending where we are in the brain. That simple amplitude training, the spots where we put the sensors on the head are all done on either some neuroscience, some research, but a lot of just clinical practice. That is what I call kind of the normal, simple approach. And then you have QEEG guided neurofeedback. That is all about who reads your cue, how they clean the data, and what is their theoretical approach to the work that they do. So in our office, we do cues, but we only do 32 channel. That means there's 32 sensors on the head, whereas a lot of offices before the 32, there was only a 19 channel, which has done great work for a long time, but now we have better, so we want to do better. And the information that comes from that then needs to be processed through a computer system or with a human being. I will be honest that our computer systems are not up to the task that human beings are, in my opinion. So our brain maps are analyzed using multivariate coherence neurofeedback and a system developed by Dr. Rob Coben, which he did heavily researched this method for autism and developmental trauma, both in children and adults. And we found with the 32, it is highly effective and it works in far fewer sessions. But not everyone's a good candidate to start out. A QEEG is 20 minutes of recording, 10 minutes eyes open, 10 minutes eyes closed. That's a lot harder to do than it sounds, especially for children. And then it's also the 20 minutes of getting the cap on. Now the cap is not necessarily painful, but it is uncomfortable. And the more sensory sensitive someone is, the more uncomfortable that can be, even bordering on painful to that person's sensory system. So there's an interplay. We don't want to force anyone into a map when it's going to be that uncomfortable. So sometimes we need to start with amplitude, and then maybe we could do the QEEG and the multivariate coherence neurofeedback. Sometimes that doesn't work well for someone, and we stay in the amplitude training. There's also all these other things like S-Loretta and Z-score. Some of these have good results for trauma. Sometimes they make people feel worse. I think this is all very variable depending on the clinician that you work with. If you have trauma, you want a clinician with that experience. That's what it comes down to. And you don't want to be left in a room by yourself to do the neurofeedback. You need that person with you, that regulating force, the support to do it properly, in my opinion. Someone might disagree, and that's okay. So that's kind of the lay of the land of neurofeedback, and a little bit about trying to find a provider that fits your needs, your child's needs. And I hope this is helpful, and I'll try to post some more.